right now, football at 4. And today, at football at 4, this week we're looking at the NFC divisions. We'll go from the west to the south to the north to the east. And then on Friday's show, we will look at the NFC as a whole. And we'll do that right now with John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com at JF McMullen on Twitter. John, what is up, my friend? How was your weekend?
It was good till today. The Madden player ratings came out. I want to talk people off the rooftops around the league. No truth to the rumor.
Well,
though.
weren't the Eagles the number one? The Eagles were the number one team in Madden, weren't they?
I have no idea. I got to be honest with you. I just saw the Carson Wentz.
They were.
Carson Wentz was obviously rated a little bit low. So I joked that he was going to retire from football because it's all over for him because the Madden player rating came in.
Yeah. Well, I saw Nate Sudfeld was like a 57. People were upset about that.
There are many mysteries in life, and that's one of them. I can't imagine getting upset at a Madden player rating, but people just get incensed about it. It's amazing to me.
The players get upset about their own rating, so it's like they're leading the charge sometimes.
Yeah, they do. They go on Twitter, and they take it far too seriously. That's part of it as well. Like I said, I'm amazed by it. I shake my head. It's people take it really, really seriously, like it matters.
Yeah. No, that doesn't matter all that much. But let's see something that does matter on the field. We're going to the West, which is home of the 49ers, the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this is an interesting division. You know, the Rams, some think, are the best team in the NFC, if not the league. The Seattle Seahawks made the playoffs last year, even though people thought they were ready to take a step back. San Francisco last year was the hot team. You know, Garoppolo, they were the sneaky team. And then Arizona, 2-3 years ago, they were a Super Bowl contender, and now they have completely fallen off to the point that they had the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So I want to start in Seattle because Russell Wilson is kind of the dean of quarterbacks in that division. Had one of his best years last year, got that team to the playoffs. Question really is, does Russell Wilson have a lot to work with? He's always was, they had no offensive line, and now it seems like the line is getting a little bit better, but it doesn't have a heck of a lot of weapons out there.
No, the line has gotten a little bit better, and you're right. It's funny how that works. They finally got it. I wouldn't say it's a top half offensive line in the league, but it's at least not an embarrassing group, which it has been at times in the past. But then you start looking outside the numbers at receiver, and there's not much there. They drafted DK Metcalf, and they're hoping he hits the ground running, but, man, he's really raw from a route running standpoint. I think he's an amazing athlete, and Russell can throw the deep ball better than most, so maybe that's helpful. Maybe they can get him going with at least a small route tree pretty early. But overall, you look at it, and you don't see a ton of people on the offensive side of the ball that scare you other than Russell Wilson. So, yeah, you're right. A lot of people last year didn't think they make the playoffs. I think a lot of people this year don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And if they do, it's probably going to be because of Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, who's done a tremendous job, obviously, as the head coach. It's certainly not what it once was, and that's at the cusp. When they won the Super Bowl, they were a yard away from another Super Bowl. That was a top 5 roster in the league. It's no longer that.
Yeah, Chris Carson, Nick Vannett, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, you mentioned David Moore. I mean, those names. Carson's, he's pretty solid, but they just don't jump off the page. So this, for Seattle to make the playoffs, it seems like Russell Wilson is going to have to almost better the year that he had the year before, or last year, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be Russell Wilson. The defense is still really solid, especially at linebacker with Bobby Wagner still there. He's arguably the best middle linebacker. If he's not, he's right there with Luke Kuechly, KJ Wright as well. So they usually have a real big advantage to have 2-3 down linebackers like that, because as we know, and that's probably the weakest part of the Eagles as we move forward, is the linebacker position, especially in this modern NFL where people are trying to cuss the fence and maybe keep a foot in the old thought process and put a foot in the new process. I think the most difficult thing has been for defensive coordinators to get linebackers that can play every down. There's very few teams that are comfortable with their linebackers. The Seahawks are one of the few.
Yeah, John, looking at the Seahawks go to the defense, you mentioned Wagner. They got Ansah to come in there, but it's not KJ Wright's a nice player, but this is not the defense that was leading these teams to Super Bowl appearances.
No, and this year it's Frank Clark is gone, and they tried to replace him with Ziggy Ansah. They drafted L.J. Collier in the first round, but that's not Frank Clark. And then you think about losing Michael Bennett and all the talent they've lost on that side of the football, the Legion of Boom and the defensive backfield. They're all gone at this stage. Earl Thomas now, the last lead, Richard Sherman, obviously Cam Chancellor, all those famous names, they're all gone. So really, it's the only ones left standing are Wagner and Wright. That's not to say they don't have some good players. And Pete Carroll's always done good things with the defensive side of the football. That's his strength, and that's what he does. But it's tough to replace players like that. And they've taken a hit, and they will continue to take more hits because it's going to take a while. If somebody like L.J. Collier, maybe they can get him up to speed a year or two down the line, but he's not going to hit the ground running and be a Frank Clark-type pass rusher week one. Let's put it that way.
John, another team in the NFC West here is the 49ers, 4-12 last year. Jimmy Garoppolo, he was the big name. He goes down. What can we expect from them? Can they compete in this division? Or, what do you expect for them this year to bounce back from a 4-12 third finish in the NFC West?
Well, I think they can compete, not for the division title, but as far as being maybe a second-place team, if Seattle comes back, we just talked about, maybe getting up to 8 or 9 wins. It starts with the quarterback being healthy. He has a high Madden rating from last year. But when you get hurt and you look at the receivers, there's not a lot there. So I joke. People jump the gun on Jimmy Garoppolo. They made him out to be better than Tom Brady after 7 starts. So that part of it was kind of silly to begin with. And then he gets hurt on top of it. I do think he could be an above-average NFL quarterback, but I'll tell you what, it's tough to be above average when you're throwing the football to Dante Pettis and Jordan Matthews, the ex-Eagles out there, and expected to start Deebo Samuel, a second-round pick. These are the receivers they're going to trot out there, and they're trying to make you believe Dante Pettis can be a number 1 receiver in this league, and maybe he can, but I certainly wouldn't count on that.
So how do they have success from an offensive standpoint?
It's all Kittle, man. All Kittle all the time.
He's big time. And I said that last year. Eagles fans were incensed when Zach Ertz wasn't all-pro. And I said, did you watch George Kittle play? The guy is unbelievable. He's right there with Travis Kelce as the most explosive tight end in football. So he is really, really good. And remember, he was playing with C.J. Beathard and then Nick Mullins for a large part of last season and still dominating games. And everybody knew that was the guy they were going to because they had nobody else, and he was still dominating games. So he's the real deal. And certainly their best player on the offensive side of the football. But I do think they have more to do. They brought in Tevin Coleman. That's a player the Eagles really wanted in free agency. He decided to reunite with Kyle Shanahan out there. He just felt more comfortable with that offense. So at least he has a running back that he wants. Jerick McKinnon's back from injury. He's talented as well. So I do think if you look at their offense, they're better at tight end, they're better at running back than they are at receiver.
All right, so offense has some question marks clearly, and the one strength that we can lean on here when talking about the 49ers has to be their defense, specifically the defensive line. And Nick Bosa, second overall pick, he's coming in there. What can you talk about with the defense, specifically the defensive line group?
Well, they got a lot of big names, and they have been drafting. Remember, they've been bad for a while, and they've been drafting high, and they went defensive line a lot. And a lot of guys, to be honest, haven't hit. Solomon Thomas being number one, but he's still there. But if you look at Solomon Thomas, if you look at DeForest Buckner, if you look at Eric Armstead, they're all first-round picks, and then you add Nick Bosa and Dee Ford. Remember, they traded for Dee Ford, who's a proven player. They had a lot of difficulty rushing the passer last year. That was their main issue on the defensive side of the ball, and they addressed it in a big way with Nick Bosa and Dee Ford. And they got to be better than they were last year. Is Nick Bosa going to be a star right away? It's possible. Dee Ford's got to bounce back a little bit. As I said, certainly better. They're going to be better rushing the passer, and that will make them a better defense.
Yeah, Ford, Armstead, Buckner, Bosa, Alexander at linebacker, Malcolm Smith. They brought Sherman in. If they're going to win games, it's probably going to be because they get to the quarterback. They run the ball with Coleman and McKinnon and Staley, McGlinchey. But they're probably not ready to be a playoff team. But who is ready to be a playoff team would be the Rams. And, John, a lot of people think this roster, is right up there with the very deepest and very best in the league. Obviously, they ended the season a little disappointing last year. And right now, when you look at that team, you got Goff, you got Gurley, you got Woods, you got Kupp, you got Cooks, you got Whitworth. They got a good offensive line. They got a good running game. Is this team ready to be a Super Bowl team? Is this the third year now of this group together? Is this when they finally make that big jump offensively with this group?
Well, I think they've already been really good offensively. I think getting Kupp back from injury helps. They really missed him when he went down. And let's face it, that's what they do. They play 11 personnel always. They always have three receivers on the field a ridiculous amount of time. It hurt them a lot in the Super Bowl. And we'll see. I think people are going to put that Super Bowl film on, and everybody's going to try to copy what Bill Belichick did against Sean McVay. And we'll see if that affects him. Because he's one of those guys, sort of like Matt Nagy and Doug Peterson a little bit as well. They fool people with all the eyewash and pre-snap movement and things like that. And the Eagles have had success with it as well, with Jim Schwartz against the Rams, where they don't fall for it. They just tell their defenders, don't worry about it. They're just trying to fake you. They're just trying to fool you. Just play good, sound defense and don't get caught up in the eye tricks. And I think Sean McVay is going to have to evolve as a coach. Jared Goff is going to have to evolve as a quarterback. But the good news is they are really talented. They are really good. And I don't see anybody else in that division that can compete with them. So they're going to have an opportunity to have a few hiccups, still win the division, still get to the playoffs, and hopefully be in a position to make a run.
Yeah, and then, of course, they have a pretty good defense, too, led by Donald. Talib's over there. Weddle they brought in. John Johnson's a good safety. Sometimes it's these teams, your window seems to slam on you in the NFL, right? It's like, the Rams were really, really bad. Hey, they surprisingly were good. Then they get to the Super Bowl. So how many shots do you have to get back there? We'll see if their defense can keep up with their offense, though.
Yeah, well, they got a good start. I mean, Aaron Donald is unblockable. He's the best defensive player in this league. He's arguably the best football player in the NFL. There's obviously the great difference in value between the quarterback position and anything else. But if you're just talking about pure football players, Aaron Donald is the best player in the NFL. So that is a good place to start. They got some big names, though, on the back seven, and they're all declining. Marcus Peters, big name, did not play well at all last season. Keith Talib, big name, not nearly what he once was. Clay Matthews, people would get excited by that name. He hasn't been the Clay Matthews that was an all-pro for about 4 or 5 years. It's not going to revert to that. So they have a lot of big names that don't necessarily live up to the reputation. But when you got Donald up front, nobody can block him.
All right, John, let's walk down to the basement now of the NFC West from last year, which is the Arizona Cardinals, 3-13 finish, 4th in the NFC West. Cliff Kingsbury coming in. Let's see if he can succeed where other college coaches have failed, making the jump from college to pro. Ranked dead last, 32nd for offensive power. So what can we expect from Arizona Cardinals this year and Cliff Kingsbury leading the charge?
Well, they got to be better. That's the good news. I don't. Cliff Kingsbury is so much of an unknown, and what is he going to do? I think there might be an opportunity to have a little Chip Kelly bump and do some crazy things people aren't ready for, and maybe he looks a little bit better than he really is before people start adjusting and catching up. I think that's their best hope. But they're doing some crazy things, and as I said, more so than anything else, it's Steve Kahn, the general manager, who hires a coach and fires him, and Steve Wilkes, after a year, trades up to get a quarterback in the top 10 and sells him for pennies on the dollar, and Josh Rosen, and then hires a coach who only wants one quarterback, so you have the number one pick, and you have to ask yourself, okay, could you give Steve Wilkes another opportunity with Josh Rosen as a quarterback and maybe draft Nick Bosa? But Cliff Kingsbury only wanted one quarterback, and that's who he hired. It was a crazy plan. It looks dumb on paper, but they almost have to be better as a football team.
Right, so better, fine, but what is better going to look like? I mean, they have David Johnson at running back. Kyler Murray, I guess that's where we can start and finish. What can you expect from him to produce realistically this year?
Well, he's a rookie quarterback, and he's got a lot of ability, and he's got that ability to extend plays. So it's going to be exciting at times, and he's going to make plays that make you go, wow. And he's also going to make really dumb plays. And I think it's going to be a mixed bag, like most rookie quarterbacks. The question is, how much does he learn from his mistakes? And that's, I think, when you sort of grade or rate rookie quarterbacks in this league, that's the first thing you look for. You understand they're going to make mistakes, but the really good ones don't make the same mistakes again and again and again. And the ones that don't get it do. So there's a lot of uncertainty. That's sort of the narrative for the Arizona Cardinals. It's uncertainty, but they've made their decision. Kyler Murray's their guy. Cliff Kingsbury's going to be there for at least 3 years, much like Chip Kelly was here, and we'll see what they can do. They're trying to do some new things. They're trying to get ahead of the curve. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury's the next Sean McVay. Who knows? Maybe he's the next Chip Kelly. It's uncertainty.
Yeah. John, they were 32nd in pass blocking last season. They gave up 218 total pressures. Kyler Murray better be superhuman.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's great when you get the quarterback and people get excited, but they didn't really address what was the worst offensive line in football. And they're throwing out a lot of the same people. And You look at it, DJ Humphries and J.R. Sweezy are their best offensive linemen. Justin Pugh, maybe people remember him from the Giants. Marcus Gilbert. It could be A.Q. Shipley at center. It could be Mason Cole at center. It's bad. And, he's going to be running for his life. And then you have to put it in the that part of the equation that any quarterback behind a bad offensive line, you have to be worried about injuries. And when you're worried about injuries with a guy who likes to extend plays, there's more opportunity for injury. So that has to be a concern.
And their defense, Terrell Suggs went out there. I don't know if he was just like, hey, Arizona's cool this time of the year. But Patrick Peterson's a stud. Jordan Hicks moved out that way. Reddick was a high draft choice. Chandler Jones is pretty good. Buda Baker was a nice draft choice. Swearinger. So they've got the potential to be okay defensively. But you're thinking to yourself, what the heck is a guy like Suggs thinking, hey, I'm going to go play with the Cardinals with this mess?
Well, remember, he went to college out there as well. It's just winding down his career. He's going to the Hall of Fame, but he's not what he once was, obviously. Now, they still have Chandler Jones as well up front. So there's no question Corey Peters is a good player. They have Jordan Hicks from the Eagles. He's going to lead the linebacking group. They have Hassan Reddick, who's a former first-round pick. They're much, much better on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball. And you mentioned really where they're best, and their top 5 in the NFL is in the secondary. And it starts with Peterson, who wasn't happy, wanted to be traded for obvious reasons because he knows this isn't going to be a contender, but he's still there. He's one of the best corners in football. Robert Alford's pretty good. They're good. They're really good at safety with Baker and Swearinger. And they drafted Deontay Thompson in the supplemental draft, and that's a guy who probably would be a second-round pick just from talent alone. So they could be good really quickly on the defensive side of the ball. I just don't think the offense is going to be able to hold its water.
All right, don't forget, this week, NFC, we'll do the whole conference on Friday. We'll do the divisions leading up to it. Today was the West. Your winner of the West, Rams, right?
Yeah, going away with it. And I think they might take a step back as well, but 11 wins is probably going to win that division by 2-3 games.
Yeah. All right, John, at JF McMullen, and, of course, every day football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.